HighBridge, a division of recorded books, presents The Covent Garden Ladies, Pimp, General Jack, and the Extraordinary Story of Harris's List by Hallie Rubenhold. Read by Lucy Rayner. Chapter 1. The Curtain Rises. Although you may not recognize it, you are standing in Covent Garden. It may look strange to you without its glass and steel market arches and its swirl of tourists. The buskers are gone, as are the rickshaw bicycles and shops peddling plastic gadgetry. What is left behind is the piazza in purus naturalibus, in its mid-18th-century state, complete with cobblestones, dust, and open drains. It's a colourful place, even by the first thrust of morning light. At this early hour, the market square is alive with London life. Fruit and vegetable sellers, carters, ballad singers, knife grinders, and milkmaids circle one another in their daily dance of work. Under wide-brimmed straw bonnets, women with red elbows balance baskets of produce on their hips. Men in wool frock coats or leather aprons toil, with their tri-cornered hats pulled over their sleepy eyes. There are children running barefoot chasing dogs. There are old men hobbling on makeshift walking sticks, as crooked as their backs. There are toothless, wrinkled women who are much younger than they look. Many of those who have come to haggle, wrapped up against the dawn's chill, belong to the metropolis's army of domestic servants. They will scurry back to their employers' homes with heavy baskets before their masters and mistresses have stirred from their beds. Of course, this visual carnival is not without its scents and sounds. The market, stacked high with fresh and rotting produce, emits a sweet stench of cabbage and apple. The wet pungency of horse droppings is equally unavoidable, as is the constant presence of yellowy coal smoke and the incense of burning wood. It is, however, the murky puddles that give off some of the more unpleasant odours. In the absence of an operational sewage system, London droops under its own stink. The wealthy have become quite adept at fending off the sudden olfactory assaults of decomposition and human waste, hiding their noses against perfumed handkerchiefs and nosegays. The poor, on the other hand, have just learned to live with the unpleasantness. Those of the labouring classes discovered long ago that many of their hardships could be smothered through song, and it is their melodies that take to the piazza's air. Many of the tunes whistled or hummed come from those heard at the two local theatres. Music is one of the mainstays of an evening's entertainment at the Covent Garden Theatre, sitting at the eastern edge of the piazza, and its rival, the Theatre Royal on Drury Lane. This part of town has always been a spot for instruments and voices, day or night. When the stage lights are extinguished, the market provides a chorus of sound instead. Higglers cry their wares, their tones floating together discordantly. Between melodic solicitations to buy quinces and oranges, they flirt and banter, challenging one another boisterously. Above their declarations can be heard yet another type of music, the urban clatter of horses' hooves, the squeak and bounce of wooden wheels, doors slamming, the roll of barrels, the cries of babies, the squeals and brays of animals. There are no silently ticking engines, no electricity or automation to do their work for them. Only the grunts and sweat of men and beasts. Despite the pulsing activity of the marketplace, there is much more to Covent Garden than this hustle of morning commerce. Not everyone comes here to purchase fruit for their pies and puddings. As morning matures into afternoon and the vendors have sold the last of their wares, the piazza's more lucrative trade begins to stir from its slumber. The centre of the action shifts from the ring-fenced vegetable exchange at the square's heart to the stone-faced buildings at its periphery. From our vantage point looking northwards, a number of the more infamous haunts are visible. In the most northeasterly corner, slightly obscured behind the arcaded walk, lies one of the set pieces of our story. Beneath a magnificent swinging signboard featuring the face of England's best-loved bard is the entrance to a tavern known as the Shakespeare's Head. The sordid details of what transpired in its dim rooms I will leave for later. Next door, to the south of the Shakespeare's Head, is the Bedford Coffee House, a slightly more respectable establishment, although only just. Its distinguished dramatic and literary clientele bestow on it a certain fashionable cachet, which barely saves it from sharing its neighbour's dubious stigma. On the opposite side of the Shakespeare, to the north, are the elegant premises of the bored Mrs. Jane Douglas. As the tavern drunks ensure that Mother Douglas's girls never go patronless, business thrives well into the early 1760s. After that time, any woman of Jane Douglas's profession will be turning her sights towards the more fashionable parts of town. First Soho, and then St. James's, Mayfair, and Piccadilly. For the moment, however, Jane Douglas and her sister Covent Garden procuresses are doing quite well, nestled in this nook of sin. The keepers of Haddock's Spaniel on the piazza just south of the corner of Russell Street are also doing a booming trade. The aristocratic set finds the novelty of indulging in a Turkish bath, a meal, and the company of a prostitute all under one roof quite pleasing. On any given night, they can be seen bumbling between Haddock's and the adjoining Bedford Arms Tavern, not to be confused with the Bedford Coffee House or the Bedford Head Tavern on Maiden Lane. In fact, there is so much here in the way of carnal diversion that you might be forgiven for omitting to notice the parish church, St. Paul's, Covent Garden, in all of its austere beauty, occupying the west side of the square. It has sat there, silently observing, for over 100 years. Even under the censorious gaze of St. Paul's, the piazza seems quite at home with abandonment. There are many more wanton establishments that hug the perimeter of the square. In fact, all of the neighbouring streets are infested with brothels, rowdy taverns, noisy coffee houses, and warrens of cheap accommodation for working girls. Bow Street, Drury Lane and Bridges Street, to the east of the square, are the most notorious. The Shakespeare's Head's rival tavern, the Rose, is situated on the corner of Bridges Street, Catherine Street as you know it, and Russell Street. This is a lewd and low place where posture girls writhe around naked on the tables. Here, glasses and tankards fly through the air. People lose eyes and have their noses broken. It's not a very safe place, but then again, neither are the streets at night. Thoroughfare and alleyway alike are the haunts of footpads and muggers. Even the cherubic-faced link boys who offer to light you home with their lanterns frequently work with robbers. People in this part of London try to get what they can by any means. Gentlemen wise to ways of Covent Garden are certain to keep an eye on their watch and a hand on their purse when enjoying the services of one of its ladies. As baffling as it might seem, right in the heart of this village of sin on Bow Street, sandwiched between a brothel and a tavern, are the headquarters of the area's law enforcement. Justice John Fielding, ably assisted by his brother Henry before his death, is the magistrate here. A police force, as we know it, does not exist. The night watch is virtually useless and easily bribed. Nevertheless, Justice Fielding is committed to tackling crime and has employed a team of 8 men to apprehend lawbreakers. At the moment, they haven't made much of a difference. It's a villain's paradise. Of course, those who first lived in Covent Garden would never have envisioned its future as being quite like this. In the 1630s, the 4th Earl of Bedford had commissioned the architect Inigo Jones to lay out a genteel Italian-style square. Initially, this was a place where the nobility had their London homes, but the neighbourhood took a turn for the worse when the Theatre Royal opened in 1663. The ever-immoral theatre and its companies of actors brought the rabble, and the rabble liked drinking and whoring, or so the story goes. However, it does not require more than a brief glance around the piazza to confirm that the aristocracy are as much the devotees of debauchery as anyone else. Certainly it was their money that helped fan the flames of its prosperity. By the time the produce market had pitched its stands in 1670, the purveyors of flesh had already set up shop. Just as morning is a time for marketing in Covent Garden, so night is the time when other wares are plied. In the evening, when the lamps are lit, and the bowed tavern and coffee-house windows glow dimly orange, the piazza shows its painted face. There is laughter and shouting, pranks are played, and punches thrown. Walls and floorboards shake to the motion of urgent coupling. There are children conceived and fortunes lost at rounds of cards. Both men and women succumb to the enticements of gin, wine, beer, and brandy. Some slide under tables. Some are sick on their own clothes. Many have their pockets picked. The pursuit of pleasure is this society's greatest leveller. It brings together the sons of dukes to drink with the daughters of tailors and penniless poets. Wealthy city merchants and military officers, lawyers, painters, and common criminals interact freely with one another. In a Britain wholly governed by the divisions of class, what transpires here in Covent Garden is quite remarkable. Even those who witness it agree, as one anonymous scribe observed. Here, busk-skinned beaux in rich lacked clothes like lords and squires do bluster. Bards, quacks, and cits, knaves, fools, and wits, an odd surprising cluster. This odd surprising cluster is made more luminous by a sprinkling of 18th-century celebrities. At the Bedford Coffee House, or at Charles Macklin's Piazza Coffee House, David Garrick, the A-list actor of his day, along with Dr. Samuel Johnson, the acclaimed lexicographer, might have been spotted deep in conversation. Samuel Foote would also have been seen, accompanied by a crowd of aspiring actresses and playwrights. Undoubtedly, Samuel Derrick would have been among this last group. There is more of his story to come. When he finished with Foote, he most likely moved on to Ned Shooter, who would have been sighted arm-in-arm with the dancer Nancy Dawson. With no long-lensed paparazzi angling for perfect shots, what an easy life such superstars must have enjoyed. On an evening in the piazza, it might also occur to you that the men outnumbered the women quite considerably. There are no genuine ladies to be found here, late at night. Even the ones that appear respectable, in their elegant hats and glimmering jewels, are merely the more successful members of the fallen sisterhood. Society has many names for these tainted women who have sacrificed their prized virtue and the sanctity of their bodies in order to service the men of this nation. Among other epithets, they are known as women of the town, members of the Cyprian Corps, impures, strumpets, light girls, faces, wantons, demi-reps, demi-mondaines, jades, hussies, tarts, votaries of Venus, nymphs, Jezebels, doxies, moles, fallen women, trollops, and harlots. They have come from a variety of locations and backgrounds. Some, like Charlotte Hayes, a devotee of Venus who features prominently in this tale, were born into prostitution. Others are its recruits. Orphans, seduced servants, poor seamstresses, trained milliners, hopeful actresses, and rape victims. They come from London and all points beyond it, from the outlying counties and from Scotland and Ireland. Some have washed up on these shores from as far afield as the American colonies and the West Indies, as well as from France, Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany. In this city of immigrants, they represent a cross-section of races and ethnicities. Contrary to popular belief, not all the ladies who work in Covent Garden started their lives nuzzled at the breast of poverty. In the 18th century, one's standard of living is a mutable thing. There are no guarantees for anyone. There are no state benefits or workers' pensions, no unemployment or disability pay. If you lose your job, you don't eat. If you want to eat, you work until you die. The concept of nationalised healthcare wasn't even a twinkle in a moral reformer's eye. This is an awkward age to be a Londoner. Change is afoot in all respects, economically, socially, and politically. Britain stands on the cusp of losing an old empire in America and gaining a new one in India. Raw materials are pouring into the country, while useful and interesting goods continue to decorate the shop fronts. New buildings, streets, and squares seem to appear with each passing season. It feels as if opportunities to make money are everywhere. But do not be fooled. The newspapers, with their shameful lists of all the bankrupt, tell another story. London is populated by speculators and debtors. Quite a number of middle-class families buckle under the weight of loan repayments. The pressure to own the latest household item is inescapable. Everyone wants to appear in the finest clothing and have a home furnished with status symbols. But meeting the cost of the rent can be difficult, and levels of personal debt are spiraling out of control. Sound familiar? Being middle class is a fairly new phenomenon, and these people are still a strangely amphibious group. Those at the top are often as wealthy as the aristocracy. Those towards the middle and at the bottom, the small shopkeepers, the master craftsmen, the apothecaries, publishers, schoolmasters, and petty clergy, are more often than not struggling to hang on. It is this precarious middle class, and those families that bounce up and down the lower end of the social ladder, that have donated a number of their daughters to the metropolis's more exclusive brothels. A lack of financial security means that a bad year of trade could bring ruin, as could a fire, a legal battle, or an imprudent night at the gaming tables. As the debtor's prison known as the Fleet beckons, the china, table linens, fine silks and furniture may have to go to the pawn shop. The family that have enjoyed the luxuries of their own house may now live in 2 rented rooms. From this plateau, the dip into criminality is only a wrong foot away. The following year, the unfortunate individuals may recover their fortunes, retrieve their goods, and move back into their terraced house. Alternatively, they may slip further into the ranks of the poor. In the 18th century, there is nothing worse than being poor. Unless you have had the opportunity of travelling to parts of Asia, Africa, and South America, you, with your soft modern sensibilities, could not begin to imagine what the realities of this state entails. True poverty means constantly fending off disease as it feeds on the malnourishment of your body. It means continuous hunger and physical discomfort. It means horrific living conditions, sharing your bed not only with other unwashed humans, but with rats, mice, lice, fleas, and bedbugs. It means feeling the cold acutely through ragged clothing, and not even owning a change of undergarments. In 18th century London, it means having no voice, no vote, and virtually no legal protection or access to true justice. More than anything, it means being feared and reviled by those above you. You are disrespected, regarded as subhuman by some, and ignored by others. You are likely to be a victim of violence and to numb your soul with large quantities of cheap gin. It is a degrading and miserable existence to which not everyone is willing to submit. Hard work may help raise you out of this sink, but most available jobs are not well paid. A life of crime is always a viable possibility. Prostitution helps quite a few women. Some even scale the social heights by its profits. Pickpocketing, robbery, housebreaking, dealing in stolen goods, procuring women for lascivious men, and forgery can also be quite profitable, as can cheating at cards. These may be your only hopes of survival in brutal London, if you have the misfortune of being born into its lowest ranks. The story of the Harrises' list of Covent Garden Ladies is the tale of these people. They are the ones who linger at the fringe of 18th-century society. Their footing on the social ladder is a perpetually unsure one, and their acceptance into the normal circles of the respectable population will never be sanctioned. John Harrison, also known as Jack Harris, Samuel Derrick, and Charlotte Hayes, are our representatives of this realm. In this parable, fate has provided us with an interesting cross-section of history's minor players, or outcasts, if you like. The hardened criminal, the determined but impoverished poet, and the daughter of a bawd. In the telling of it, we must remember that these personalities are as much the products of their era as we are. Their judgments and biases belong to a time less forgiving than our own. Do not make the mistake that moralists of their own age might be inclined to, that it is their badness that motivates them. This reeks of the simple-mindedness that sent petty pickpockets to the nooses at Tyburn. You have been provided with a glimpse into their world, the extreme difficulties, the cruelties, abuses, and inequalities. In the heart of each of them beats an indomitable desire not to suffer these miseries, even if, paradoxically, it means bringing about the suffering of others. Be warned, this is not a tale where wrongdoers are punished and the exploited are vindicated. This has nothing to do with the gilded, safe and privileged Georgian era of Jane Austen. She and others like her are on the inside of society looking out, and their sight does not extend as far as these dark corners. There is no comfortable moral to be found within the lurid biographies of the Harrises' lists, nor between the beginning and end of this book. But history rarely provides a comfortable moral to a good yarn. Chapter 2. The Legend of Jack Harris. Jack Harris was born in the very cradle of illusion, in the space that existed between two theatres. Nothing was as it seemed in Covent Garden, where actors assumed the identities of imaginary characters, and masked men and women moved through the pleasure-seeking swarms anonymously. Against such a backdrop, it was easy to vanish, or to become someone else. Until he grew proud and foolish, he had never stepped into the direct glare of the limelight. He had never allowed anyone to truly know him or his story. Jack Harris had hidden well, and what little he revealed to the world about himself was complete fabrication. After his sensational arrest in 1758, those who had only ever seen him as a silhouette moving against the backdrop of Covent Garden wanted to hear his tale. Although no one had ever demonstrated any interest in him before, he decided, with the assistance of a hack journalist, to recount his narrative and offer an explanation for his wickedness. Long before his parents brought him into being, destiny had marked out his family for suffering. His father, he claimed, came from a good Somersetshire family, but had the misfortune of being born a younger son, with no inheritance and few prospects. The marriage he contracted with Harris's mother had been formed out of love, and consequently had fallen foul of his upstanding relations. Cast adrift, with no money and no position, the young couple set out for London, where Harris Sr. had been given many promises from great men of places, sinecures, and pensions. As a member of the landed class, he believed that he had no shortage of allies within the government willing to assist his ambitions. Unfortunately, upon his arrival in the capital, he found that doors were shut to him, that men who had at one time guaranteed him their favour could only shrug their shoulders and wish him the best of luck elsewhere. With the birth of Jack in the mid-1720s, the young family found their resources rapidly expiring. In order to keep the wolf from the door, his father had no choice but to turn to his pen for support. Fueled by his sense of anger and betrayal at those who had lured him to London on false hopes, Harris Sr. lashed out in a series of invectives and failed not to abuse those who had so abused him. As a Whig by birth, Harris's father also began to rethink his political affiliations. If his traditional associates among the aristocracy would not have him, he would cross the floor and wound them as a member of the opposition. Shunned by his own society, Harris Sr. soon made himself very remarkable among the anti-ministerial writers of those days, and the Country Party enlisted him under their banner. In spite of stringent libel laws, Harris's father flaunted the dangers inherent in being so vicious an antagonist of the parliamentary leader, Sir Robert Walpole. Once he had wetted his sharp pen, he found it difficult to put down, especially as his hostile epistles were at last bringing in money and winning him the support of several wealthy backers. It seemed that the situation had begun to brighten for the Harrises, who were now contemplating an appropriate education for their eldest son. Then, quite unexpectedly, when his father was upon the point of sending me to Westminster School, events took a turn for the worse. Harris Sr. was arrested. Harris's father had made the fatal error of attaching himself to Nathaniel Mist, a notorious thorn in the side of the establishment. Mist's weekly journal, a scurrilous publication renowned for spouting unabashed Jacobitism, rolled off a secret printing press until the authorities sniffed it out and smashed it to bits in 1728. Despite stints in prison and in the stocks, Mist and his numerous colleagues continued to publish their libel, this time in the form of Fogg's weekly journal. A series of raids soon put an end to this enterprise as well. Among the handful of anti-ministerial writers rooted out during the course of these arrests was Harris's father. Once again, Harris Sr., this time locked away in the local compter, looked to his friends and political associates to assist him in his time of need. But no one ever came. He was there for some weeks in want of bail, all his party deserting him as soon as they had notice of his misfortune, Jack recounted. His father soon sank into an irretrievable depression. Matters were only to grow worse. The authorities looked upon Harris Sr.'s crime with gravity, and as such, he was transferred to the King's Bench prison, where he was sentenced to be imprisoned for 3 years. Additionally, he was fined the penalty of £500, a crippling amount for a family in the Harrises' position. It was during this time, in the mid-1730s, that Jack made regular visits to his father, although his keeper pretended that he had strict orders to let nobody see him. In later years, Jack admitted that observing his father in such a despondent and weathered state profoundly affected him. Harris Sr. had been broken. His misfortunes had so soured his natural temper that he had become a perfect misanthrope. The ill treatment he had received from both parties had given him an utter detestation of all, and he seemed now to languish at his confinement, only because he had not an opportunity of imposing upon the world as much as they had imposed upon him. Betrayed, exhausted, and ill, Harris's father bid him to learn from the mistakes he had made, and not to waste himself in pursuit of an honest life. In a final paternal gesture, Harris Sr. reached for his pen and committed his instructions to paper. In his wholesome advice to his son for his conduct in life, he summarized those thoughts he had expressed to his child as they sat together in his cell. Harris Sr. reminded his boy that as he had no fortune, a conventional education would be of no use to him. At any rate, it was his experience that there was nothing so great an obstacle to getting money as learning. "No, no, my son," he continued. "I have taken care to prepare you for quite another employment. Would you get money, my son? Study men's passions, ply them. Is a man ambitious of fame? Go through thick and thin to make him the greatest patriot that ever existed. But be sure of your reward before you give the finishing stroke to his reputation. Does he love wenching? Pimping is a thriving calling. It must be orthodox, or some who do would not possess it.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?